Now let's do this!
Don't give up your day job.
So you've just been on tour?
Yeah, I just got home from doing some King's X shows. I leave in a couple of weeks to go to rehearsals and then a tour with the Jelly Jam. And as soon as I get back from that, I have more King's X shows. So kind of a busy summer.
Fantastic. And you're up to maybe 30-something years with King's X now?
Yeah, we actually first met and jammed together in either 1980 or 81. I've been actually trying to figure out exactly when it was recently so that we could keep up with it. But
right.
30-something years, yeah.
Yeah, and I've always been really impressed by the fact that you guys seem to always be on great terms with each other and still have a really tight unit.
Yeah, I mean, it takes being family to stick together that long in a band.
Absolutely. And well, how about I tell you about how I first heard of you? I was about 13 or something, and I got into my friend's car one night, and some music started playing, and I said, "What on earth is this?" And she said, "It's a band called King's X." And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was the I think it was your first album, Out of the Silent Planet, and I'd never heard anything like it. And this would have been in the early 90s that I first heard it. And then I particularly got into Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, which I to this day I still think is just such an incredible recording.
Thank you.
Did you know when you were recording it, like, did it feel special when you recorded it? Did it feel like you were doing something different?
It felt like that to me. I think we all felt that way. I know that it turned out to be something none of us saw coming.
Yeah.
It just, we spent a lot of time in the studio working together. We spent a lot of time experimenting with tones and sounds and things. And we just locked ourselves in for about 4 months of just trying different things out. And
right.
before we knew it, it was done. And with all of the first several albums, I always had exactly the same kind of response. It's like while you're recording something, you're kind of too close to it to really get the big picture. But once you're done and you hear it all finished and in order, that's the first time you really get hit that it's, whether it's doing something or not. And I remember on both the first and second album feeling like something was really going on.
Right, because there's nothing else out there. Even now, there's not really anything else out there like it.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, just one little side question. What is the opening instrument on the first song?
That's a sitar.
It's a sitar, right?
Yeah, it's also some electric guitars along with it.
Right. Gotcha.
So you're quite famous for your tone, and you're talking about experimenting with that. At what point in the experimentation did you suddenly go, that's the one, that's the thing I'm going to be, that's going to be my signature sound?
It sort of happened a few years before we got a record deal, when we first moved down to Houston, and we got there in 1985, and we'd already been together about 5 years at this point. And the reason we moved to Houston was there was an artist on a record label in Houston that the label was putting a good bit of money behind the guy, and the label were big fans of our band, but the only reason we weren't on the label is they were a Christian label, and we didn't want to sign with a Christian label.
Ah, okay. That makes, yeah.
Is that because it would have limited your reach or your exposure, do you think?
Not just that, but it's not who we are. It's not what we do. We're not about evangelizing or being Christian propaganda or anything like that. Matter of fact, we all pretty much despised that industry and really wanted nothing to do with it.
Right.
But what happened is this artist, we did meet some friends at Star Song Records that we became friends with over the years. And even though they understood we didn't want to be on their label, we were friends. And
Yeah.
at one point, they offered, and they also thought they really loved our band. They were big fans of the band. We were doing a whole lot of touring around the Midwest, and they would come out and see us anytime they could. Well, eventually, they had this artist they were putting all this money behind, and they decided to see if we would be interested in being his band for 1 year, recording an album with him. And basically the deal was they would help pay off all of our bills because we had a massive PA and light system we were touring with.
Yeah.
They paid off all of that and gave us a salary for it. Actually ended up being more than a year.
Wow.
And we did a little bit of touring with him, and we did an album with him, and it became a big hit album in the Christian world, actually. And
Wow, cool.
and we I co-wrote the large majority of the album with the guy, and so it turned out to be a good experience.
And this is prior to Out of the Silent Planet?
Oh yeah, this is years before.
Oh, years before. Okay, right.
This is in 85, 80, around then.
Mm-hmm.
And so we basically did our time with him, and we did this tour. And what happened is we were all listening to a particular Gino Vanelli album around that time, and the guy we were playing for really loved this one particular Strat sound that was on one song. And so he asked me if I would play a Strat on the stuff that we were doing with him.
Yeah.
And at the time I was playing like Les Pauls and just humbuckers. And so I decided to go ahead and try the Strat with him. I had owned a few Strats over the years. I just always gravitated back toward humbuckers, to be honest. It just was better for playing leads and stuff for me. And anyway, so I started playing this Strat, and I already had Lab Series L5 amplifiers, which were my favorite amp in the world.
Right.
And when I put the Strat through it, it kind of had a unique tone, and I kind of liked it. It wasn't, it didn't knock me out like, oh, this is the greatest tone ever, or oh my God, look at what I found. It didn't hit me like that at all.
Yeah.
It was a little bit strange, actually, just because a Strat plays differently and has a different kind of attack sound and everything because of the single coils.
That's right.
I found myself having to adapt my playing to fit the tone of the guitar. And I wasn't really that hip on it, to be honest, but when I switched back to a Les Paul for some, when our band started doing our own gigs again and we quit working for the artist, I went back to my Les Paul. And both Doug and Jerry were like, no, man, that Strat sounded pretty good. Why don't you just use it on our stuff? And that's really how the tone happened. It was not really a big eureka moment or anything. It just sort of happened.
Right. Because it's not common for people in the world of heavy rock to play Strats, is it?
No, it isn't. And that was the weird thing about it that I was having problems with. Not to mention that it was a Strat Elite, and for some reason, the particular one I still have the one that I used on the first 4 albums.
Yeah.
It's one of the most horrible playing guitars I've ever owned in my life. It's
feels
so
weird.
hard to play that thing. It's like playing something that's fighting against you the whole time, and I hated that guitar. But everybody liked the tone, so I used it for years. But at a certain point, I was so happy to just quit using it and try some other things.
Right.
It really was like playing with your hand tied behind your back. It was a horrible guitar.
And did it improve your playing because it made you work harder?
Well, it may have improved the muscles in my fingers. I don't know if it improved my playing. Because when a guitar plays too easy, I don't like the way I play. So
Interesting.
There's sort of a middle ground I like to find where I'm struggling a little bit, but I don't want it to be that hard,
Right. That's an interesting point. I guess it's like also someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan who kept his action high for tone and to kind of, so you could dig in differently rather than skim across a low action.
Yeah, yeah. I find myself doing stuff that might be technically better and faster on a guitar that plays really easy. But anytime I hear tapes back, I just don't really care for what I'm playing. It just sounds like pablum. And,
Right.
And as soon as I pick up something I got to struggle a little bit with, and I hear a recording back,
Yeah.
every single time it turns my head, and I go, I like that a lot better.
Yeah.
So I just started playing guitars that are a little bit difficult to play, make me have to reach a little bit, and that's kind of what I've been doing for a few years.
Right. Well, I've always felt that you're really unique as a guitar player in the rock world. Like in many ways, I don't even necessarily think of you as a rock guitarist, even though you clearly are. But only because there seems to be so many other influences in there, and so many times over the years where I've stopped and broken down, something that I've heard on one of your albums and thought, what's he actually doing there? Tried to play it myself. I discover all these, really creative notes and strange phrasings, and it just seems like really unique to me. So how do you where did that come from? Different influences, or how do you approach that?
Well, yeah, I think it started very, very early on. When I was a very young kid, I just was the Beatles were the only thing I cared about.
Right.
They were the only thing I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of guitar things that happened on Beatle records that were different than anything I had ever heard before.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
had different voicings, different tones, different idea of how to use a guitar in a song. I mean, I think that's where it started. And then as I grew up, I was influenced by a lot of touch players, guys that what the magic is in their hands more than the guitar and amp. People like Brian May and people like Robin Trower, and just to name a couple. And even Ace Frehley, he had a very signature tone and sound and melodic style of his own also, and he was a big influence.
Yeah.
But biggest influence were people like Brian May and maybe even Alex Lifeson, his rhythm playing.
Right.
Because he did a whole lot of he probably did the most interesting rhythm stuff when I was growing up of any guitarist that I knew. I loved everything that he did all the way up through Moving Pictures. I was just a super fan and just loved every note of everything. And so he had a different approach on how to fill up a three-piece with a guitar with these droney kind of parts and stuff, and with these repeating line kind of things where one note changes. And he had a huge impact on that.
Yeah.
And
I was commenting to Danny before we started the podcast, started recording. We were listening to some of the music, and it's like, that's a really massive sound for a three-piece.
We were watching the some of the live footage from Woodstock.
Yeah.
Woodstock 94, yeah. And it was just this really massive sound for a three-piece. And so, and I did remember seeing a video of just of you, I think, talking on a guitar channel on YouTube, I think it was, and you were talking about that drone sort of sound.
Right.
But you're also talking about different tunings. Did that sort of influence the way you played early on? I mean, you say earlier on in your guys' career, you would do all these wacky tunings that, looking back on it, was kind of stupid.
I only used like one wacky tuning when I was growing up, other than normal tuning. And that was a G tuning, believe it or not, where the top two strings are exactly the same, or the two low strings are exactly the same note. And it's an open G. And it's a tuning that Hot Tuna used to use, and that was where I got it from, and I learned to play a bunch of stuff in that tuning. But it was between that and regular tuning all the time. I was always around a bunch of blues players in Mississippi that would do the drop D tuning on their acoustics, and I always thought that was really interesting and really swampy sounding and cool.
Yeah.
And I had heard Brian May do it like on Fat Bottom Girls, and and Eddie Van Halen used drop D tuning every once in a while just on a song here or there. And there were rock guitarists that were doing it occasionally. But where I got the idea to do it was from the Beatles once again. That She's So Heavy.
Yeah, great song.
The only way I could play those notes was to tune my guitar lower than it was, and that's what opened up my eyes.
Right.
And I said, I can play with this thing tuned down. And I just started doing drop D stuff and started writing everything in drop D and just sort of developed an entire style around it.
Yeah.
And then when I played some of my stuff for Doug and Jerry, they freaked out, and then Doug started down tuning and writing that way also, and that's how we found our sound.
So you play live. When you play live, you play actually drop C, don't you?
Yeah, it's C to C.
Right.
It's D to C most of the time, and then D to D occasionally. We tune it up, but just a full step down.
Right.
Right.
And you've sort of answered another question I had actually, which was about when I said earlier that I don't think of you as a rock guitarist. I was trying to form a compliment there in the sense that I think of you as being far more than that, far more diverse and creative than limited to one genre. And one thing that I've always loved in your playing is the amount of space and the amount of feel and the sense of groove and all of that. And I'm hearing you talk about the blues guitarists you were around in the past. I guess that's where some of that influence would have come from as well.
Well, yeah, I think that blues is the basis of all of my playing, without a doubt. Everything is based on blues playing. It just was what I was into growing up. It was the way guitarists played in the late 60s, early 70s. It was about blues,
Yeah.
influence in rock, whether it was Led Zeppelin or whomever. It was all about that. And so, yeah, that was my entire upbringing, was that kind of playing, so that when somebody like Van Halen came along and things got into double picking and hammering and all this other stuff, I almost wanted to quit playing guitar. I thought, really no reason for me to play with where things are going, because I don't really think I can do that.
Yeah,
And then I picked up some of that kind of way of playing and figured it out and thought, well, yeah, I can. But then I realized this is not what I want to do. I mean, nothing against it. It's just not me. And I just went back to blues playing, but I had to prove to myself that I could do it.
Yeah. But and I think that you're really good at choosing your moments, because you can definitely play fast. There's no question there. But what I like is that you build it dynamically, and when you do play fast, it makes sense.
Cool. Thank you.
Reinforces the story of the song, I think. So
good. Thank you.
How do you and I sort of asked this myself as well. I'm a guitar player as well, and I'm curious to know, how do you approach solos? Because every solo that you've seemed to have written for a song on one of your many albums, I couldn't even begin to know how many albums you've done now. But with King's X, what is it, 15 albums or something?
It's hard to figure out, because I think we have either 12 or 13 official releases, but we have about 6 or 7 online releases also. So
oh, really?
I'm not really sure how many there are now.
Well, with it seems like every time you lay a solo down, it's original. And I find that really inspiring, but also really frustrating, because I struggle to, sometimes I fall into that trap of repeating the same ideas. And I'm really interested to know how you approach that. Like, how do you come up with something that seems so fresh every time?
Well, the main way is that I play it fresh. I never practice a solo. First and foremost, it's got to be spontaneous the first or second time I hear the song while I'm feeling it.
Wow.
After that, you start thinking too much, and for me, I just stop immediately and go, we'll come back to it another day when I don't remember the song and I feel it fresh again.
So most of those solos are effectively improvised then, roughly?
Almost all of them, except for there's a couple that weren't, like on the solo on Mississippi Moon.
Yeah.
I doubled the solo, so I worked out a part real quick. But for instance, this is not unusual. Let me tell you the story of, like, the song Black the Sky.
Yeah.
We were in Atlanta doing Dogman album, and um, Brendan O'Brien and Doug both said, "Man, it would be great if you played a wah on the solo on this funky song."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay," but I didn't have a wah with me at the time, so we sent somebody out to get a wah pedal, and we just happened, they just happened to have just loaded up the tape machines and stuff, and were rolling the song, and it had just started at the beginning of the song when they walked in with the wah pedal, and so he walked over, handed it to me. I plugged it in on the floor, and by the time we, plugged it in and everything, and I literally had not even played one note through it, it was about to be where the solo was, and I just looked at Brendan and said, "Hit record," and so he did, and I, without even hearing the wah, played that solo. They stopped the tape. I unplugged the wah, handed it back to him, and said, "You can take it back."
And that's the solo on the record.
Yeah, that's what's on the album. That's how we do solos. Yeah.
That's amazing. Like, that completely baffles me because the solos sound so like original, and each one of them has its own plot and its own dynamic. It's like I thought you were going to say that you spent hours and hours and hours, mastering them.
Oh, no. I am so the opposite of that in all ways when it comes to making music. Right. I really believe in that initial feeling and that initial spontaneity.
Absolutely.
And if that can be captured quickly while you've got it, that's where the magic is, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And those oftentimes those first takes, it's like capturing lightning in a bottle, isn't it? And then
exactly
come back to it and trying to, like you say, you start getting in your own head about it and going, oh shit, what did I just do back there?
You can ruin it that way.
Yeah.
And that's how each solo is different, though, because that's what makes it easy for it to be different every solo. Because if you're really getting into a new song that you've never played a solo on, it makes you hear different notes and hear different things to play when you first hear it, and that's how they become different. It's when you sit there and try to rehash. Like we were saying, that you start repeating yourself with the same old.
Yeah.
And that is what makes it easy. I never really thought about the solos being different. It's just that each song inspires differently. As long as you can get it captured during that inspiration, it's going to be a different solo.
And then you have to go back and relearn them for live, of course, wouldn't you?
Only some of them.
Right, okay.
I do the over my head solo, note for note, live pretty much.
Yeah,
I do a couple of solos, note for note, but for the huge, large majority of the night, I'm improvising solos every single night.
Right.
Well, I would imagine with upwards of 15 albums worth of songs, it would be quite hard. I wouldn't imagine how you'd be able to remember all of those solos anyway.
Yeah. Lucky for us, we've been keeping the set somewhat focused around a certain group of songs that we're all pretty familiar with, and then so these days it's we just go out and it's like riding a bike.
Right.
Another one of my favorite solos of yours is on the song "Everywhere I Go," which
I remember specifically doing that one. There's a feedback. I turned the amp up just so loud it was almost knocking the walls down, and I just tried to walk around facing the amp and try to get just that right feedback. And there was this one little squeaky thing that happened on that. That's probably my favorite guitar part on that whole album.
That's the bit I'm talking about. It sounds like pure emotion, that solo.
Yeah.
I remember hearing that when I was in my early teens and just being blown away by it.
Oh, that's cool.
It was just so raw. It was so raw. I guess you guys have a pretty loyal fan base, like almost you could say cult following all around the world. And those fans have been, there the whole time through with you, really, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. And it's really an honor, and it's really amazing because thanks to the fans, we're doing some of the biggest shows we've done in a very, very long time in the last few years. We're playing all the most high-end showcase clubs and theaters in the country now, and it wasn't always that way for us. So,
and how do you process or deal with people's genuine love of music and the amount that you guys have meant in their lives. Like, I mean, I could tell you from my life, when I first got into Gretchen, there was a pretty dark time in my life, and that album really, really helped me. I don't know exactly how to sum that up, but it really inspired me, and it sort of gave me strength, and it helped me get through some of those early years. How do you connect with that, or do you have to sort of push that sort of thing aside?
We actually are kind of immersed in that daily, because what we do is we do a free meet and greet with anyone in the audience who wants to come by and say hello to us and meet us and shake our hands, and we take pictures with them. Yep. And for instance, we just got off doing 4 shows, like 2 in the Chicago area and 1 in Madison, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee. And we would, the word has kind of gotten around in America that that's what we do. So we do kind of early shows, starting at 9:15, between 9:15 and 10 p.m. at the latest. Yeah. And then we spend about an hour and a half after the show literally meeting every person in the building. And that's awesome. What I mean by getting immersed by it. Everybody that comes by has a story. Everybody who comes by has a reason they want to come by and tell us about. And it's absolutely amazing and honoring and everything, and encouraging every single show, because that's what we do. I mean, a lot of other bands, they charge all this outrageous money. Yeah. Just to walk by, don't even speak to them, take a picture, and
don't make eye contact.
I understand people doing that and having to help, pay for the production of the tour, and that it really does help those kind of things. I understand all that, but for us with King's X, we just like to give a thank you back to everyone who shows up, and that's awesome. And like I said, it's turned into that. When we came out, each one of these last nights that we did, we were stunned because the line was completely around the entire building, the whole crowd just sitting there waiting. And we go through every single last person, however long it takes, every night, and just immerse ourselves in the stories of the fans. It's just like one big, it's like a big love fest every show.
Yeah, and you guys have always struck me as a band that's a very positive force in the world. I mean, the overall theme of your music is very positive. Not in a corny way, but just in the sense that it's very human, it's very real, it's raw emotion. I think it's something that people can relate to really easily. And just the fact that you guys are a united team on and off stage, and the fact that you do that kind of thing for the fans, I think you guys are really a great example for how to be a band.
Well, thank you, appreciate that. We're happy that we still get to do it. We feel very lucky.
Yeah.
Do you still own your own PA system and lighting systems?
Oh no.
No. Was that back in the day? Was that an economic choice that you didn't have to hire them and you could save a bit of money there?
Well, we were a band, doing the club circuit back then, and back in the 80s, clubs didn't have their own lights and sound. The band was responsible for bringing in the show.
Right.
Things changed after that to where now we don't have to worry about anything like that now. But for years when we were starting out, you had to travel with lights and a PA, period. You had no choice.
And you guys did the hard graft in the early years, didn't you, to get back sort of on the theme of this podcast. What was it like in the early days, before you had really established yourselves? I'm guessing money was tight, and I think you guys were living together, weren't you, at some point?
Yeah. I mean, we went through all kinds of different phases. At one point, there were 8 of us in a 2-bedroom house, sleeping on the floor and stuff. And we literally were starving to death, to the point that we had to get government help with food stamps, and just so that we could eat. And we would combine our food stamps together, and Doug would cook, like a big massive thing of spaghetti or something, so that we could have, we could just survive.
Right.
But we paid dues as hardcore as any band I've ever heard of before. I mean, it was 7 years before a record label even remotely glanced our direction and cared at all.
Right.
And for 7 years, we were loading our own PA and our own lights up 3 flights of stairs in the middle of Omaha, Nebraska in February on, solid ice steps, and stuff like that. I mean, that's the life we were living. And it was a horrible life, to be honest. It was.
How do you stay motivated for that 7 years of slog? Was the idea always to look for that record deal and year after year it wasn't coming in?
We just recognized that there was something magic going on between us, and for us it never was a matter of if it was going to happen. It was just a matter of how long is it going to take. But we're going to stick in here until it does, because we just really believed. I mean, we really believed, and thought that we just had something different. That if it could be heard, there might be an audience out there somewhere, and we just really believed. So that belief got us through all that. I mean, I'm just barely touching surface of the paying the dues, man. We put in hardcore times and dues those years. And even after we got a record deal, it was still pretty hardcore dues for a while. I mean, because right before we got our record deal, we had finally started actually making a little bit of money in clubs and drawing crowds and doing pretty good. I mean, we were like, wow, this is okay. Things are starting to happen for us. And then we got a record deal, and we couldn't play those places anymore. We couldn't just keep doing that. We had to go out on tour opening for people that, and play in front of people who didn't know who we were and didn't care that we were there and just wanted us off the stage. So, we had to go through, starting at the very bottom of a very big lake, again. And so it was getting a record deal is like getting a punch in the stomach of reality. It was hardcore.
And and tour support is kind of like the food stamps, but from the record company, and you've got to pay it back.
Yeah. If they do bail you out or help you at all.
Right.
And they tend to not really care to give you tour support unless it's something really big. Like Atlantic gave us great tour support to do 4 months with AC/DC because that was common sense, to have that kind of promotion. It's just something worth putting money into. But back in the early days, our first tour was like a co-headline with a band called Hurricane, and I can tell you that was one of the most unenjoyable tours of my whole life.
How come? What was the reason?
Just because it was a co-headline, and everybody on the whole other side of the fence had egos the size of New York, and so it was just ridiculous.
Right.
So after that, we said we will never do a co-headline again. People have to know where their place is. We don't care if we're the opener. We just want to know that's who we are, and that there's no argument about it. Yeah. So then we toured with like Blue Oyster Cult.
Oh wow!
And that went pretty well, playing for some people, and we got pretty good response when we were doing that tour. And so little by little, it was just starting to build. Like I said, from the very ground floor up again, just totally building little by little. When the first album it came out, it didn't really sell anything. It got a whole lot of critical acclaim, and we got a lot of publicity in Europe over it, a lot of publicity. We were on the cover of magazines in Europe before the album even came out. We were on the cover of Kerrang, which was, England's #1 rock mag. Huh. So we were getting massive critical acclaim, but I think we sold about 30,000 albums. It wasn't much. And then, Gretchen, but it was enough to, okay, we'll do another album. Let's keep building. And so we did Gretchen, and Gretchen didn't do much better back then when it came out. It just did a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And the album just wasn't selling. We weren't selling records still. But we did have a video that went into the top 10 in the U.S. And so every single day on MTV, when they would do the top 10 video countdown for weeks, we were in the top 10 countdown, and it was hilarious because it'd be like Madonna and then King's X, and who the hell is King's X? And then Janet Jackson, and then Bon Jovi or whoever. And
What was
we
the
were
song?
the only person. We were the only band in that list that was just people scratching their heads like, "Who is this?" And because we weren't on the charts, and the record wasn't selling, but people were calling in like crazy to MTV saying, play that video, play that. Who is this band? Play it again.
And was that
So by the time
Summerland?
it was Over My Head.
Yeah.
We did a video for Summerland also, but it didn't get played nearly as much as Over My Head. Over My Head was like I said, it was in the top 10 for weeks. It just killed. And so after that, things changed for us just because people knew who we were all of a sudden because of that exposure. So by the time the third album came out, it's way outsold the other two by 5 times, 10 times more.
Yeah.
And then the other, the first 2 albums began to sell at that point. But it took a while for things to catch on.
And was there a natural progression to that, or what do you think the particular factor was that made Faith, Hope, Love sell more?
It was just, because the machine was building all that time, and the time was right. I mean, people didn't necessarily go out and buy Gretchen, but because of all that MTV coverage, people were talking about King's X. So when a new King's X album came out, it was at least something people thought about for the first time ever. And people just happened to buy it,
Do you think that you were hindered in any way by the fact that rock and roll at the time was very kind of clean and poppy and sort of silly, and you know what I mean? That definitely was the rock scene, and we certainly felt like we weren't any part of that, that we didn't fit in. It's almost like you guys
but we didn't look at that negatively. We kind of wanted to fit in because every single person we knew was making a lot of money. I mean, all the people that we knew, in all the other bands, they were making a killing, and we weren't. Right. And we were more popular than some of them as far as being known. And so this weird thing happened where people just began assuming we were big and assuming we were doing the same numbers as everybody else. And, we started doing big tours, and we were doing well there for a few years. We were selling records, but we never were doing as well as what everybody thought we were.
Right.
It's funny how with the people we've talked to on this podcast, they all seem to have a different definition of what success is for them, or what the word success means. What does that mean to you guys?
Well, we feel pretty successful at this point, but it's taken, going this long and being this old to be able to look at it and see it for what it is and recognize that we're very successful. We're very, very lucky. We sell out, theaters and premier clubs anywhere we go. And that was always the dream come true for us. I can remember us talking about that like 15 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago, just saying, man, if we could just play theaters and fill them up, that would be huge. That would just be awesome. That's really all I'm looking for. None of us were looking for the kind of success that brings a whole lot of problems.
Right.
Because I'm a very private person who loves that I can walk down the street and, I get busted every once in a while. Somebody will, who I am, but people are very cool and tend to leave me alone. And during the early days when we were selling some records and all over MTV, I got a taste of the other side of things, and I really hated it, to be honest. It was when I was most miserable in the band was when we were the biggest.
Interesting.
And I was able to put all that together with age, and now that I see we've rebuilt this other thing that is manageable, that is exactly the size that we said we wanted to be.
Yeah.
Now we all look at it and just are extremely thankful and pinching ourselves. We can't believe that it's happening.
Because I read that there was a point where sort of like a growing pains sort of point where the band started to need and require and look for its own independence. I read that was roughly through the Ear Candy era. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting because I'm curious to know how you look back on that record, because I have to say it's actually one of my favorite albums of yours. Like, that album to me is like absolutely brilliant. And one, I heard that you recorded it lying on your back, and two, I heard that it was a difficult time for the band. So I'm interested to know how you look back on that album.
Well, it was. It actually wasn't as difficult a time to me as it was right before that.
Right.
Like Dogman was a difficult time in the band because Jerry was going through some very tough stuff,
Right.
and so that affected everyone, and there was just this dark cloud all over everything for a while, and it was the whole Dogman, tour and album and everything. Although we did enjoy it and we did have some fun, we had a great time being out with Motley Crue.
Yeah.
We did Woodstock, and we were doing some big shows, and we were on the radio in America still at that, quite a bit at that point, because Dogman was getting played all over the radio, and so
Yeah.
it was a good year for us, and it was successful and all that, but. We weren't real happy. We were going through all of us were going through some stuff, but mainly Jerry. Doug went through some things then too. So that when I think back at that time, that was a hard time, even though I really loved the album and we just, it was a time that we had to survive, to be honest. We got through it. By the time we got to Ear Candy, I was more relaxed finally again. Jerry was starting to come back to normal, and what we did with that album is we started digging out a bunch of our older songs that we really had never considered to use for King's X stuff, stuff
really?
from the first 7 years. So there's a lot on that album that's old stuff that we reworked.
Like which songs?
Picture was a very old song that used to be called The Door.
Oh, right. Okay.
And we were doing that in the first, doing that around 82 or so, probably.
That's amazing, because I've always thought of that album as when you guys really turned a different corner in a good way. I loved what I thought was a new direction.
Well, it was a new direction in that we were pulling out things that we wouldn't have normally considered for King's X. So
yeah.
In that way, it was a new direction. And Arnold Lanny was the producer, so it was yet another producer with a different angle on things. And he was getting into the old stuff. And because we were working on it and reworking the stuff, we made it new. We made it current for us.
Yeah.
We didn't just dig up old songs and play them. We reworked them.
Right.
But that's where the inspiration came from.
I tell you, I think one of my favorite King's X songs in the out of the entire catalog is "Life Going By."
Oh, that's also one of my favorites too. Thank you.
Yeah, that song, I just can't get enough of that song. The way that the melody lifts into the chorus and the guitar work. That's another thing that me and my friends were always buzzing out about listening to your stuff is the EBO and the volume swells and all that creative playing again. It was so awesome.
Cool, thank you. That's a very difficult one to try live. So we don't do it really anymore, but we did try it a few times.
So you were talking about how you'll stay behind at shows and talk to your fans. And I'm hazarding a guess just by Danny's response and his, really amping to do this podcast with you, is that there are a lot of musicians out there who really love what you do. So you obviously probably get to talk to a lot of those people. What advice do you give them about, do they ask, what's it like to be in the music industry? How can I break through? Is there any sort of one piece of advice that you give people coming through?
Well, actually, when the people come through, that very rarely is that the kind of thing that is talked about or asked. Usually it's more like, man, when my dad was dying of cancer, this song and these lyrics helped him so much that we played it at his funeral. That's the kind of stuff that's coming through line usually. People are crying, people are hugging us. We're thanking them, they're thanking us. It's a really touching thing. It really is. And then some people just come through and go, just want to shake your hand and have been following you for 25 years, and then they just go right on through. And but
Right.
it's usually not advice type stuff. But I do get asked that kind of stuff in interviews a lot.
Right.
The advice I give people, I guess it changes every time. But one of the things I was talking with in an interview the other day that just really is good advice. The interviewer brought it up, and we talked about it for a bit. But he talked about he had been interviewing. I think it was I don't remember who it was. It was somebody like Steve Vai. He had just been interviewing, and he had asked him something about, what's the secret to having a good band, and Steve, he told me what Steve's answer and it's basically the exact same answer I always give. And that is the most important thing is to really, really have a good chemistry with the other human beings you're going to be playing with as people. Because if not, your band is not going to last. Right. And your band will have a whole lot of headaches and problems that are just not worth having. And so he asked, the interviewer asked me the same thing he had asked Steve. He said, so you think it's important to have a bunch of hacky guys who all really connect as people together than putting a bunch of good players together? And I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
I said, think of you too. When they first started playing, other than the drummer, they barely could play their instruments at all, but it was about these guys who wanted to be in a band together. I said, that is exactly what it's about. That is the entirety of what it's about. To me, that is by far the most important thing.
And you guys often remind me of the Police in the sense that each of you are, individually really great at what you do, and then what you do together becomes even better. You know what I mean? So what was it like when you first met Doug and Jerry? I mean, they're both extraordinary, aren't they?
It was an instant recognition of how good they both were. Just instant. And the way I met Jerry was I was in a band that opened for the Phil Keaggy band.
Oh yeah.
And Jerry and Doug were playing for Phil Keaggy on the tour that I was about to do an opening show on. And the band I was in, our drummer had quit right before the show. So
why did that happen?
I don't even remember what the reasoning was, but the drummer left the band right before the show.
Sick of carrying and setting up all that shit.
It's a bit of a dick move, isn't it? Right before a show.
Yeah, I'm out of here.
This was a big gig. I mean, this was in front of a couple thousand people. I mean, it was a big show for us. And so, well, Jerry was playing drums, so I volunteered to play drums just on the one show to get us through, so we could keep the gig. But I didn't even have a set of drums, right. So. The way I met Jerry is we show up to open up, and I go up to Jerry right after his sound check, and I go, hey, man, my name's Ty. I'm in the opening band, and our drummer quit, and I don't have a drum. I said, I don't have a drum set. Could I please borrow or use your drums during our set if I promise not to touch a single thing, not move anything? And Jerry was so cool that he actually let me do that, and so that's how I met Jerry. He was playing drums, opening for him and Doug in Phil Keaggy band.
Right.
So,
excellent.
and then what happened is over the next few months, Jerry ended up joining my band that I was in, playing drums for us, and we gigged all around Springfield, Missouri, and had a blast in that band together and became good friends.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Jerry was still going off and doing shows with Keaggy here and there. and during that same time also, I played a talent show at the local college, and Doug was in the audience. And I just did this little small solo in this Rita Coolidge song. And I had not even touched my guitar all year. And some girl came up to me right before the show and said, will you do this song with me, and can you play leads? And literally, my Les Paul had been sitting in a closet for the whole semester, had not even opened it.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I can play, and I'll do it. What the heck? It'd be a chance to bring the guitar out and do something. And so I pulled it out and did this one song at this talent show and did this little solo, didn't think anything about it whatsoever. Doug was in the audience, and apparently he really liked the solo and kept asking everybody, who is this guy? And couldn't find anybody at first that knew who I was. It was my first semester at school. I was kind of a new guy. I was a new guy there. And so he finally found somebody that knew my name. And he was like, man, I want to jam with that guy. So he went back over to Jerry. They went over to Jerry's house, and he was hanging out at Jerry's house. And Jerry's wife looked up my name in the local college phone book and dialed my number and handed the phone to Doug and said, hey, here, this is the guy you're about to talk to. and so Doug goes, hello, hey, this is Doug Pinnick. You don't know me, but I play in the Phil Keggy band. I said, yeah, man, I just was in the band to open for you guys just a little while back and saw you. You were killer. And he was like, well, man, I just heard you play, and we should jam. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So me and Doug started jamming together with this other guitar player, and me and Jerry were playing in a band together separately, the band that opened for the Keggy band, and then Jerry and Doug were still playing together in the Keggy band. So we were all connected playing together before we became a band together.
Yeah.
And just during all that time, Doug called me up and said, hey, man, why don't us guys form our own band and do this thing together? And I was like, heck yeah, let's do. And that was 1980 or so, and the very first time we played together, we all knew that there was something there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This was something we needed to make happen.
And when was the first time you really saw Doug come into his own as the passionate, the powerful performer that he is?
The first second we played together. I mean, he just always had it. And I mean, it was so immediately obvious that he was incredible and better than anyone else I had been in a band with before.
Right.
And the same with Jerry. Just both of them were on a different level than anybody I'd played with before.
Yeah, Jerry.
I played with some good cats.
Right.
The band that me and Jerry were in before was called the Tracy Zen Band, and that was a good band. There were some really great players in that band.
Yeah.
But when I first played with Doug and Jerry together, the bar was just immediately raised for all of us. We all pushed each other, and we all were like, yeah, we can take this somewhere. We just knew.
Yeah. Yeah, Jerry's got a groove that just seems to inform everything else that happens in the band, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, he's a monster.
But I mean, it's such a unit. I mean, I love guitarists that play with groove, and like I said earlier, I think that's one of your strengths. And the way that you, all three of you, really lock together. That's another thing that stood out to me when I first heard you guys. Was just how tight you were. And I was playing "We Were Born to Be Loved" to my girlfriend last night, and saying, check this out, check out the end of this song. And I was like, this is before, I assume this is before anyone was using computers. Like, they have to actually play this.
Oh yeah, that's tape. Yeah, that's real.
Right. How on earth did you write the end of that song?
To be honest, it was a complete joke. It was completely a joke. It was us almost intentionally trying to ruin the song, and Doug was getting mad about it. Because Doug had come up with most of that song, and he was just like, man, this is ruining the song. And we just kept taking it further and further, and count it out this way and change it on this loop and all this stuff. And we were laughing so hard, me and Jerry and Sam were laughing so hard that that's always an indicator of we're going to keep going. If we're being
Right.
entertained by it, we're going to take it further.
Yeah.
So
Is there actually a pattern to it though, or is there some? I've been trying to work the pattern out since it came out.
there absolutely is a pattern, but
Right.
if you try to figure it out by counting, we do things where we come in intentionally off the beat in order to throw people off,
Right.
but we're still counting, and it comes back around for us. But the illusion is that it is almost free form at times,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And also now that I'm, a little older and a little bit more experienced in the industry and so on, and I'm listening to it now, realizing how tight, for example, the bass and the kick are especially on that section. These days that would be edited, wouldn't it, in Pro Tools or something? And there's a different discipline, I think, from musicians that didn't grow up in the digital age because they had to get it right going in rather than fix it in post.
Yeah, absolutely. You see a lot more finesse in players from that time period because they had no choice but to have it.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like a survival of the fittest sort of thing.
Right.
And so what about these days with, because now you're playing in lots of different things, and Jelly Jam is amazing, by the way. I also love Jelly Jam. And you run a studio and you do all sorts of things. Is this now a reflection of just curiosity and enjoyment and creativity? Is it also something to do with the changing times and needing to expand to, have different streams of income?
I think it's probably equally both.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I wanted a studio in the first place was to have the freedom to be able to create. It wasn't about the money.
Right.
But then having a studio allows you to be able to use it for some additional income if you want to.
Yeah.
And so I do mastering services. Like, matter of fact, I mastered somebody's project today.
All right.
And just got home from doing that just maybe 30 minutes before this call.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a regular day for me. I'll go out there and do some mastering on a few days here and there. And I'm also rehearsing at the studio right now because I've got everything set up in a way where I can hear everything just right and rehearse all the old Jelly Jam stuff that I haven't played in a long time.
That's the next tour. That's the next tour, right, Jelly Jam?
Yeah, I'm flying out on July 15th, so I've got 2 weeks left to tighten everything up. But I've been working on it for a few months already, and we already had some rehearsals, as a band together already too. And it went really well. But awesome. I'm going to fly out on the 15th, and we're going to do about 5 days of rehearsals before we actually do the shows.
And how have you and the other guys managed the transition in the industry of recent years? We've gone through quite a few big changes, of course, and the last one being streaming. A lot of conversations and difficulties that we've all been up against. So how have you guys managed all of that?
Well, we finally are beginning to figure out ways to be able to make a living at it still. But to be honest, since the digital age, the income of artists, just had the floor ripped right out from under them.
Yeah, that's right.
As soon as CDs became available, income went out the door.
So you date it back to CDs? I thought you were talking about downloads.
No, this started with CDs and then became bigger with downloads. So there was a 2-part phase in the industry that just basically took all money out of the pockets of artists.
Right.
Completely just took the money out of the picture, completely, where there's no way to make a living. And we had to try to figure out how to survive that. But part of it was figuring out a strategy and sticking to it of how to build the live shows to a different level and a different income, because we had no choice if we were going to keep playing music. Because nowadays, that's almost the only way you can get any income from it. So luckily for us, the plan has been working, and we're back to a point where, we go out and play and we can actually get a paycheck. But there was a long period there where it was hard. It was very hard.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into what you meant around how CDs took money out of the pockets of artists, because a lot of people in the industry would see those as the halcyon days. You know, record sales were through the roof. People were replacing their old vinyl collections, and you know, you could sell 150,000 albums, a million records. But so how was that?
But that's the case of already established artists who have sold millions, and people replacing catalog with a different, with a different sound. Mm-hmm. That's not how it works for a brand new album.
Yes, that's right.
What would happen is when when an artist like us that was a new artist when CDs came out, we'd make an album. And what we saw is instead of, 150 to 200,000 people buying vinyl and discs and stuff, it as soon as the CDR became something that was in every single house,
right? Yes,
those sales went to about 1/8 of those sales because only a few people were buying the CDs. Yeah. And then making copies for all their friends. And so people didn't buy anymore. And that is why we lost so many record stores, so many record labels, so many artists. King's X, we were devastated. We were pretty much bankrupt by the CDR when that came out.
Right. So so that's when you did start to see the decline of you're exactly right, the retail stores. I was working in music retail at the time the CDR came out, and I was like, man, this is going to completely fuck everything up.
Yeah, destroyed the music industry as far as the health of it, and an artist being able to actually make even a meager living because suddenly everything you did was just stolen. And then with downloads, it even got easier.
There would be people who would be going, well, you guys have got 15 records, you've been around for 20, 30 years, you must be multi-millionaires now that you've done all of this stuff. What do you just say to someone who is stealing your music, and yet you are they're your core audience, they're coming to see you play live? So there's a sort of a dichotomy there. The very people who are supporting you are also ripping you off in other ways.
Well, it's to each person's, it's their own conscience or whatever. I just know that for me, I don't steal people's music. If I like it, I buy it because I understand that a lot of artists are being pinched so hard because they can't make anything off of what they release that it makes it hard for them to go back and make another album. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but King's X hasn't made an album in years.
I've noticed.
That is part of it. That is part of it.
Right. Are you working on one now?
No.
Oh, okay.
Danny says hopefully.
I read it on the Wikipedia page, but who knows what we all know what Wikipedia's like.
we've talked about it, and we may get around to it next year. We may not.
Right.
We finally are getting some offers that are very legitimate, and it makes us at least have to consider it. But until all three band members are gung-ho about it, all on the same page and really feeling good about it, it's not going to happen.
But the current landscape, you wouldn't get a very good deal, would you? I mean, the whole 360 deal bullshit that seems to be being bandied around, are they the kind of offers you're getting, or?
No, we're getting more of the type of offer that we used to get in the old days, which kind of disappeared for about 15 years. Nobody was really getting those kind of offers anymore. Right. People were expected to do albums on, $20,000, which is hard to do in a real studio. And it's what it is it's giving us a situation where we can use a real producer in a real place and take the time to do it right, because we don't really care to do an album unless we can do it that way.
Of course.
And so it's just lucky for us, things are getting bigger for us over here. And like I said, so that the demand is increasing over here for us. We're getting played on satellite radio every day. We have a whole new generation of fans. just things have turned around. So it's a different situation again where
That's awesome.
where we could do it for real again.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about it, and we're talking with producers, and we'll see. We'll see. If everybody gets on the same page, it'll happen.
There was something, back in the old days before everything was so available on the internet, there was something so exciting about getting a hold of albums, and I think buying albums added to the experience of them. And
Yes.
especially for us here in New Zealand, it was hard to get a King's X album. And it's like when you met someone who knew King's X, you immediately were friends with them because it was like this little underground movement here. And and we would have to figure out ways of getting the albums by there was one particular store. In fact, we had to travel into town to go to a store called Marbeck's and get them to order it in from the States. And there was one time when my dad went overseas. He went to America for business, and I got him to buy Out of the Silent Planet for me on CD. It was the first CD I ever owned. But then when Dogman was coming out, we had to order that, and I got that on cassette. And we ordered it well ahead of time because that was going to be my birthday present. And so we ordered it well ahead of time, and it came into the country about a month or two before my birthday. And it finally arrived. My mum went and picked it up, and she came home and she goes, "Okay, I've got it, but you're not allowed to listen to it until your birthday."
Oh, God.
And I'm like, but and I didn't know what to do. And so I realized that the previous album, which was just called King's X, had just King's X written on the cassette. It didn't have an album name. Right. So I went and I swapped the tapes and spent the next 6 weeks or so listening to Dogman, and then unwrapped it on my birthday as well.
I was reading an article yesterday, in fact, about the devaluation of music, and in particular, they were classifying music as being, art music like classical or jazz, and how in the day you'd buy the vinyl or the CD, and the liner notes were a really important part of, certainly for hardcore music fans. They want to know who played on it, where it was recorded, who produced it. And that seems to be something that's lost nowadays with online, with downloading. All you see is a little 600 by 600 pixel, JPEG or whatever, and you don't get that hardcore fan anymore.
Yeah.
Knowing about, all of that.
Well,
that
luckily vinyl is completely exploding in the U.S. again. It seems to be. Well, it's most definitely more popular than it has been in 25 years by far. It's becoming a thing where if you release an album, you have to release it on vinyl in America.
Right.
So even Jelly Jam is on vinyl, this latest one, and that is the standard now. It's just becoming huge.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love vinyl.
Yeah, me too. And people are digging that old feeling, like you were talking about, of enjoying the big art and the whole package when it's big like that. It's exciting.
Yeah, and you really just that excitement, that the whole experience of it, and the feeling that you've really got something. That's just, I still feel that way actually about music anyway, probably because I grew up that way, but I think that adds to the whole listening experience. Yeah.
I do too. I'm a vinyl freak. Now, I've got about 1,000 vinyls out at the studio, actually.
Really? 1,000?
Yeah.
Wow. From all the way back in the day, you still got the original ones?
Oh yeah, stuff from all the way back to Beatles and before.
Yep. Wow, that's awesome.
Matter of fact, I just recently got a very rare Japanese vinyl of Abbey Road that is it's known for having deeper, richer lows than on any of the releases that came out in America.
Wow.
And it does sound absolutely phenomenal. It's just amazing. My friend Wally Farkas had a copy of it, and I heard it on a big system at my house, and it was just like hearing Abbey Road in a way I'd never heard it before. It was just like I was sitting in the studio with them. It was just unbelievable. Wow. And so I'm a vinyl freak. Certain albums like that, I'll spend extra and get one of the rare vinyls that is known for being sonically superior.
Yeah. I mean, that's easily my favorite Beatles album too, Abbey Road.
Yeah, I love it too.
And like when I was a kid, I didn't have anyone playing the Beatles around me or Hendrix or any of those artists. I just, had whatever was on the radio. I think the first time a Jimi Hendrix song was brought to my attention was Manic Depression on Dogman. And
oh, yeah?
Yeah, and I was like, what is this? And I mean, I knew who Jimi Hendrix was, but I wasn't into his music because no one had ever played it to me.
Right.
And that was my entrance into getting into Jimi Hendrix a little bit later. Was like, and to be honest, to this day, I actually still like your version better, but probably because it's the first one I heard. But I love Manic Depression.
It's only because you heard it first. I can guarantee you.
I see. Yeah, but I mean, same thing with the Beatles influence as well. Like, I didn't grow up with the Beatles, and then a few years later, when I got to about 19 or 20 years old, I went through a huge phase of discovering the Beatles on my own terms. And I feel like that's something interesting about a band like you guys. You got all these different influences, and you're very focused on music first. And what can then often happen is that your listeners start to look back into the sort of stuff that influenced you, if that makes sense. Even if they're doing that subconsciously.
Yeah.
I know there wasn't really a question attached to that, but I just thought I'd throw that in there. and how's Jerry, by the way? How's he recovering?
He is doing fantastic, and he's in a lot better shape than me and Doug.
Right.
He really is. He works with a personal trainer, and he works out really, really hard. And because of it, he's playing like he did when he was in his 20s.
Wow.
Because all of the shows recently, he's just been unbelievable. He's better than ever.
He's such an energetic drummer.
Yeah. There's an intensity.
Yeah.
There's an intensity there that, I mean, what kind of conversations do you guys have about, two-part question, one about musical direction. Do you even have a conversation there? And the other thing is about the intensity that you guys put in the music. Like, we were just watching that clip of Over My Head, from Woodstock, and Doug starts talking about his grandma and the fact that she never told him she loved him, and it's really intense, and it gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. What kind of conversations do you have in the wings about that sort of stuff, or do you just let it happen?
We talk about everything that is humanly imaginable to talk about.
Right.
Because all we do is travel in a van together for hours every day going to the next show, and we talk about whatever latest documentaries we've seen and all this different, whatever controversy that's going on.
Yeah.
Talk about politics, talk about flat earth, talk about science,
Wait. Hold on. Do you have a flat earther in the band?
Not really. I mean, Doug almost was one, but I think that he's been told enough contradictory, solid science evidence at this point that he at least does not just accept it as true.
For someone who must have flown around the world to play a lot of shows, surely that living that experience and that evidence tells him that the world is not flat. Surely.
Well, it's obviously not. I mean, all physics are built on spinning, and we can see all things in the universe spinning in circular form. There's not one flat surface spinning out there anywhere that we see.
Right.
Or is it all just one big Matrix type simulation?
Well, I mean, it's the same as atoms and molecules. It's just they're bigger. All things are small round things, are big round things revolving and turning.
Yeah.
All matter that exists is that. So it's hard to argue that one away.
Thanks for that weird tangent.
No problem. I was actually going to ask whether you guys talk about Game of Thrones on your.
We actually did talk some about Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones did come up on this last trip, actually.
Okay,
but we don't normally talk much about that kind of stuff. It's usually crazier stuff like, just insane conspiracy theories and whatever, you know.
Right. I noticed there's some talk if we're going to go down that path a little bit. I don't mind going down that rabbit hole.
You never mind going
There
down
was
rabbit holes.
there was a photographer who was tasked with taking photographs directly after 9/11, and he had taken all of these photographs of Ground Zero, and he was supposed to hand it all over to the government who'd hired him, or a federal agency. I think it was FEMA who'd asked him to go in there and take photos, and he refused to hand it over based on what he was seeing under the towers there. And he's been on the run, living in Argentina for the last 15 years, or 14 odd years. But that was, for some reason, made it into the news recently here in New Zealand. Do you have a theory on that? Are you a 9/11 truther, or?
Well, I don't have a theory. All I can say is that there is enough questionable evidence out there that to know absolutely for sure that we don't have whatever the full truth is. Right. I mean, the fact that military grade pyro stuff was collected in the dust by citizens and tested. You know, stuff that can only be bought by military. You know, they were talking about, I'm blanking on the name of this stuff now. They were talking originally about this, you know, stuff being painted on the beams that will ignite and melt beams. And they were, you know, I saw, you know, people trying to debunk 9/11 using it with regular commercial grade stuff.
Right.
But then I heard the news of several different independent persons that collected dust from at the bottom of the buildings, who later, when people found out about it, asked them if they wouldn't mind some of it being tested. And that's when they found that military grade material that burns through metal. And it's all in the dust. So there's no logical reason for that in any of the answers we're hearing. You know, all of us have seen Building 7 go down, and I mean, I've heard some explanations that try to explain it away, but it's really hard. It's like having to suspend what you're seeing to believe it, because it looks so obviously a demolition situation.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't really know. I don't hold an opinion and say I believe this about it. All I know is that there are enough legitimate questions about it that do not make sense to know that we just don't have the truth. The fact that we can't see any of the video footage of whatever hit the Pentagon, except for those two frames that are, you know, unrecognizable of whatever it might possibly be. We've got all this footage of what the size the hole was before it all burned up, and it's way smaller than the jet was supposed to be. And they, you know, the fact that they confiscated all footage of all, you know, from gas stations, from all of the film around the Pentagon, that, you know, this stuff is on film. It can be clearly seen somewhere on video, and yet they won't let us see it on purpose. And, I mean, they won't even let us see the plane flying in the air before it happens. They just won't let us see it. So we know they're lying. You know, that's the only thing we can count on. We know they're lying.
So, in essence, in the true essence of the definition of the word conspiracy, there is a conspiracy there. As to how far down the rabbit hole it goes to.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that Donald Rumsfeld, the day before, held a press conference, and you can pull this up on YouTube for September 10th, and Donald Rumsfeld, he goes on TV in the U.S. and says that they've just discovered well over $2 trillion missing that they can't account for in the Pentagon. And the next morning, the Pentagon has its record section blown completely to pieces. And we never hear another word about that.
Right. Oh my God.
So, I mean, and we can't see the footage, so I'm not saying anything other than they're not telling us the truth. That's the only thing that's completely obvious to me.
And do these sorts of things inform your music? Just swinging it back around to where we started the conversation. I mean, in some way it must do, right? Yeah.
It's all in the stuff I write. Matter of fact, latest Jelly Jam is in some ways, is covering the mistrust of government and press and whatever, and how games are played,
Do you think there are some games afoot at the moment? I mean, clearly there are in the US elections, but are we seeing the full picture with the Donald Trump circus and the?
I have no idea. I have no idea. The only thing I can say about that is that I'm dumbfounded that this is actually happening. I'm just completely dumbfounded.
As are the rest of the world.
Yeah, same. Yeah, exactly.
It just makes no sense to me because for me it is just so completely easy to see through his BS that it shocks me so many people don't. I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
It's actually terrifying, isn't it, to think that he could actually stand a chance?
It's horrifying because if he did actually get elected, then America would deserve everything that's coming its way. And there's a reason why in America the number one search thing is how to move out of the country.
Oh, come on down to New Zealand, man.
Yeah.
Plenty of space down here.
Have you ever? You strike me. All of you guys actually strike me as being fearless when it comes to what you write about in your music. Are there any? Have there ever been times where you've hesitated?
Has there ever been what? I'm sorry.
Has there ever been an occasion when you've hesitated to write about something? Like it seems that you're happy to write about anything, but have you ever thought, I don't know if I want to put that into a song?
No, I deal with that quite a bit actually. I'm Doug is more able to just lay it out there.
Yeah.
Lay his soul out there, and it's what I admire about him, and it's what people love about him. And that's also what I love and admire most about John Lennon, who is my favorite musician that's ever lived, and songwriter.
And I've always thought you sing like him too.
Well, thank you. It's just because I grew up, listening to Beatles and trying to sing like him to where I learned to sing along with him, and now I don't have any choice but to kind of be like that.
It's not a bad thing.
It's how I learned. But I mean, the fact that he was so open about really, really personal, horribly personal things, inspired me to eventually finally get over it and just throw it out there myself. The whole album, Safety, my solo album, Safety.
Yeah, I've got that.
That was where I met that crisis and had to just give up and say, look, it's what I admired about John Lennon. I'm just going to put it out. And that one was brutal to write and release, and I'd never listened to it.
That was on the back of a marriage breakup, is that right?
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting that it's hard for artists often to put themselves into something so brutally, and yet for the listeners it can be so liberating and so therapeutic, because I think it makes you feel less alone in your own shit,
And oftentimes those are the things they connect with the most.
Yeah, and it ends up meaning more, I think, to people. I mean, I remember hearing the album Safety, and I remember I don't know if I had read anything about your actual situation, but I remember thinking, man, there's something going on here, and I related it to my life in totally different ways. But I mean, that's the power of music, isn't it?
It is, and I think you nailed it when you say it makes you feel less alone to know someone else understands, and obviously that everyone goes through it if somebody's writing about it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've taken up a lot of your time, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Thanks,
and
Ty.
For putting this whole thing together. It's been really, really great of you. Thank
you. Well, I appreciate it. It's just been fun.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you've that you feel like you want to say, to I don't know, up and coming musicians or just general people out there?
I just nothing groundbreaking or different than what other people say, but I just say be yourself. I mean, it's cool to learn how to play people's music and learn. I mean, I used to try to copy Brian May just to learn the style and have the feel, try to feel it.
Yeah.
But however, I knew that it would be silly for me to just play like Brian May. So,
Right.
I mean, I learned a lot by imitation, but at a certain point had to embrace whatever it is that I do, even if I don't like it, just do my thing. And that's hard to do because it's just like looking at, I hate looking at pictures of myself. I hate hearing me play guitar back. Most of the time I dislike anything like that where I have to view myself.
Right.
So that's enough to make a lot of people be intimidated about going on stage and feel horrible about themselves. I just finally had to give it up and go, I may hate the way it sounds and the way I look or whatever, but people are cheering. So it very obviously is not being experienced the way I feel. So I just had to let it go and just do my thing and realize that the more I get comfortable with simply doing my thing and being myself, the more people like it. So
Right.
that would be my biggest encouragement.
That's great advice. I've been through a very similar process myself, and it's really funny to hear someone that I've been a fan of say the same thing. So,
Cool.
yeah. Well,
I guess
sorry.
all of this stuff is exactly the same for all of us.
Yeah,
we
exactly.
all of us that love to play, we all go through the same things.
This is true. So where can people find out more about you online or on the Twitters or on the Facebooks? What are your channels or?
The best place to keep up with things is on Facebook, but there are more than one Ty Tabor page that they're not official pages. I do have an official page which has the most followers, and it's at the address facebook.com/Ty Tabor Fan Club. As long as that's typed in, you'll find the correct one. Or go to tytabor.com and click on the Facebook icon, and you'll know you have the right one.
Great.
Or I have a YouTube channel also, got Twitter. We have a Jelly Jam page that news and stuff is happening on all the time, also on Facebook and a website. And then there's also the kingsxrocks.com site that keeps up with all my King's X touring and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Great.
all three of those places have info on me that are unrelated, but pretty constant.
Fantastic.
All right.
Well, thank you, and from on a personal level, thank you so much for all the great music you put out there. It's really meant a lot to me growing up, and it's really changed my life. So I just wanted to slip that in there.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and it was a great time getting to talk with you. Thanks.
You too. Thank you
Cheers.
very
Thanks,
much.
Ty.
Thank you. Have a great week.
You too. Enjoy the weekend.
Yeah.
See you
Thank you
later.
very much.
All right. Take care. Bye.